Hey guys. Okay, for this video what we'll be going through is version control using Git. So basically any project I start doing I always use version control, and in its simplest form I use it so if I'm making changes to my code base, working away, and then something goes wrong, it allows me to go back in time to a point where it wasn't broken. So in its very simplest form it at least gives you that benefit. Okay, so what we'll do for this video is go through the basics of Git, how to add files to a Git repository, how to commit those files, and how to merge. And an addition, because we're going through Git, we'll have to show you creating branches and merging branches. So this is a feature that's a little bit of a benefit and difficulty with Git. Just a brief outline, the reason I use Git opposed to Subversion or Mercurial is that with Git it is a local and distributed repository. Subversion is a centralized repository. So I may not be 100% accurate saying that, but what it means to me as a developer is that I can create a repository locally on my local file system, and I can commit to it and put it on an external drive, take it home with me, link it to a centralized repository when I get back to work. All of those benefits, and also the biggest one is work offline. So with Subversion it's very similar. You could do most of those things, but in a corporate setting where you have multiple developers sharing a centralized repository, Subversion doesn't really work like that. So in a simple form, that's the reason I'm using Git. And yeah, you're welcome to use any other repository, and this tutorial will give you a pretty good outline of how version control works, how I use it, and how Git recommends using it, and it will be transferable to all the others, Mercurial, Subversion, even CVS if you really feel like using CVS. Okay, let's move on. So at this point I've just created a directory. Oops. A directory for this example. It's called version control. Now this directory could be any directory that you have that has working files in it. For example, if you're doing a website or whatever, you would have a directory similar to this. So all you have to do is go into your working directory, and then the first thing you have to do is create a repository. Now this is one thing that's quite nice with Git. So git init this local directory. So this command right here, what that does is it initializes a new Git repository in this current folder. So it'll initialize the repository and prepare it so it can become version controlled. So let's do that. So now that it's been initialized, we can get a status. So git status, what it does is it will give you a status on a Git repository showing you possibly files that have not been added to the Git repository, files that have not been committed, and any possible conflicts or merges, which we won't get into in this video. But at this stage it's been initialized, and you can see down here we're on the branch master. So on branch master there are untracked files, and the untracked files are file 1, file 2, and file 3. So a difference in Git that's unlike Subversion is that when... Actually, I take that back. Yes. Okay, so let's go and add these files to the Git repository. So git add. Now this command, git add dot, is telling Git to add all the files from this current directory with the dot. So dot is a command line operator, and it just means this directory. So I could say user local blah 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 version control, but it's easier to just say this directory. So we just added the files to this directory. Now let's have a look at another git status. Okay, so now you can see we're still on the branch master. There are changes to be committed, and the changes which will be committed are new files being added, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so it's telling you exactly what's about to happen. So with this add, we've done two things. So we've added the files to Git, and we've also moved them into a staging area so they can be committed. So from this point, let's do our commit. Okay, so this command right here, git commit, is just like you would have seen in other version control systems. It's committing the files to Git, so it's locking them in place. The -m is just a command line flag, which means message, and the message in between these quotes is adding new files for the first time. So no rocket science there, it's all pretty simple. The message down here it's giving me is that it's added 3 files, 5 insertions, and 0 deletions. And it's also telling us it's set the permissions mode on the files as well with this 100.664 on all 3 files. We won't get into that right now, but that's just the permissions on a Linux or Unix-based file system. So now if we do another status, you'll see that nothing is happening and it's clean. Now, at this stage, we've done a few things. We've created a new repository in our working directory. We've added all the files that were in the working directory to version control. We've then committed them and given it a nice message that says exactly what is happening. And then we've done a status to verify that the directory is actually clean and we haven't missed anything. Now, that's a pretty good workflow. Everything's happened cleanly there. So at this point, we can move on to what's a little bit different about Git and their recommended version control. So what we've done so far has been a pretty clean workflow, and you could continue to work like this indefinitely with just change, commit, and then continue. So that was the first part in a 2-part recording on the basics of Git, and in our next video we'll move on to the recommended Git method, which is using branching for development and merging into master for continuation. Okay, thanks.